The idea of freedom of speech dates all the way back to ancient Greece. During 1791, the Bill of Rights was instituted with its First Amendment. With the right of freedom of speech, allowing citizens to speak their ideas without any government interference telling them what or what not to say. What led up to the Bill of Rights was a very twisty road over many centuries of war and conflict through old civilizations. A people which is able to say everything becomes able to do everything, was a quote stated by the French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte, who conquered countries for the French Empire, putting them under the beliefs of France, which supported free speech at the time. Ancient Greece also had a form of democracy in which a select amount of people are to vote and whoever/whatever gets the most votes wins. This sounds very similar to current-day voting. However, only direct male citizens of white descent in that civilization were allowed to vote, which disincluded women, slaves, and touring persons regardless if they were a white male or of other inclusive characteristics. Conducting the events that led up to freedom of speech is a path of legal action, protests, and speeches by the hundreds. The United Nations all come together to support the right of freedom of speech. The UDHR, United Declaration of Human Rights, states in Article 19 that everyone shall have the right to hold opinions without interference. The ICCPR, International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, has a version of Article 19 that further rectifies this by citing the special duties and responsibilities that could therefore be subject to certain restrictions, in which these things lie with freedom of speech. The United States specifically was working on other rights of people and/or companies leading up to the Bill of Rights, where the 10 constitutional amendments reside and uphold many rights and responsibilities, including freedom of speech, of course. The rights of persons and society was more endearingly before the Bill of Rights was issued, which is what leads me to think that the government had the idea of free speech in their back pocket. The right of freedom of speech is a controversial topic to say the least, and has changed many things over the decades. The Bill of Rights was passed after Virginia became the 11th state to favor it. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, adopted during the French Revolution in 1789, individually actuated freedom of speech as an inalienable right. This movement happened as to give people or persons the right to speak freely and openly about their opinions. If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. Was stated by Eric Arthur Blair, more commonly known by his pen name of George Orwell, a critic, novelist, polemical journalist, and a supporter of democratic socialism. Martin Luther King Jr. was an activist for colored people's rights, making a speech called "I Have a Dream." He was able to make this speech happen due to his right to freedom of speech. The right affects all citizens of America, despite some groups thinking that should change. Even though this sounds like a very forgiving right, considering it's called freedom of speech, it does have its responsibilities and restrictions, being censorship laws specifically. A person may not spread false information or accusation/slander about another person without any proof or with any malicious intent. They cannot lie or make true threats. As well, speech does not protect plagiarism or obscene material. The impact of the Bill of Rights was major in general. However, the short-term impact was one of the greatest factors due to it being a major turning point for America. After the Bill of Rights was published, only 3 years later, Thomas Paine, author of the novel Common Sense, published The Age of Reason, a critique of Christianity and religion that defamed many Christian devotees. Freedom of religion was also a major dilemma in earlier ages of America. Without freedom of thought, there can be no such thing as wisdom, and no such thing as public liberty without freedom of speech. A quote from Benjamin Franklin, a famous American writer, technician, engineer, scientist, diplomat, printer, publisher, and political philosopher. That's a mouthful. The positive side of freedom of speech was that there were now many people spreading their ideas, whether people agreed with them or not, which is exactly the beauty of this right. However, the negative impact of it is that depending on the person or people speaking, it could be inciting violence between people or betray state secrets or just generally offend them. This right has impacted many groups, including anyone opposed to the government's actions, colored people, women and women activists, and people who immigrated from other countries and places. The long-term effects of freedom of speech is game-changing for the new laws that come and go. Freedom of speech has caused many turning points due to it being a right as to let people speak their mind and idea without any government restraint. America's greatest contribution to the world is its concept of democracy, its concept of freedom, freedom of action, freedom of speech, and freedom of thought. A quote by Benazir Bhutto, an important political figure who was a Democrat statesman and was the Prime Minister of Pakistan. Presidential debates, protest speeches on rights and responsibilities themselves, and many other very important major topics that have been made possible because of this right. Freedom of speech has led the way for many societies and civilizations, with the idea dating back all the way to ancient Greece. Learning about the Bill of Rights, First Amendment right, freedom of speech is very important, considering it made thousands of pivoting movements possible. Future generations can take this life-changing right into consideration if or when they make any new rights, responsibilities, or movements in the political world.